Hello, aspiring hunters. Welcome to the Hunter Experience. In the Black Continent, a territory unknown and mysterious to most of humanity, there is something that has always intrigued me deeply. The creatures that inhabit this vast region seem to avoid contact with humans, as if there were an invisible barrier, a tacit limit that prevents relationships from becoming more direct or even violent. With the enormous number of beings inhabiting the continent, it is hard to believe that such a phenomenon does not have an explanation. I do not dare to claim that I have the definitive answer, but my experience with various narratives, records, and reports leads me to raise some hypotheses. I do not know if I can call them definitive conclusions, but perhaps they can offer some degree of understanding, though limited, of this peculiar phenomenon. There is one idea that, at least to me, seems to make sense. The creatures of the Black Continent, as formidable as they may be, perhaps do not possess a predatory instinct directed at humans. One could argue that over the centuries, we have observed an incredible variety of beings in this continent, from the simplest forms of life to almost indescribable entities. And yet, none of them seem to show any interest in attacking us in such an explicit way as one might expect from such grand, or if we prefer, wild beings. Now, an essential question here is to understand what motivates these beings to stay away. Are humans, in fact, invisible to these creatures? Are our presences so irrelevant to them that it is not worth even considering and offensive? However, this does not answer something that seems even more crucial to me. If these creatures have the ability to approach and perhaps even destroy, what prevents them? And yet, one thing seems clear to me: the behavior of these creatures cannot be interpreted solely through a logic of confrontation. It is more likely that there is a more subtle reason, a complexity in their actions, or even in their apparent inaction. On the one hand, they avoid direct contact. On the other hand, there is a kind of reciprocity between what is lived on the surface and what is witnessed in their depths. A dynamic that, when observed more carefully, reveals an enigma. And perhaps the secret to their inaction lies precisely in our inability to decipher their signals. I am starting to believe that the answer may lie in a deeper and more symbolic relationship. If we think that the Black Continent is, in many ways, a reflection of something we still do not fully understand, we can also suggest that the behavior of the creatures may have something to do with the perception of the human being as part of a vast and intricate ecosystem in which conflict would not be a desired solution. They might possess a worldview in which interaction with humans is not seen as a natural instinct, but as a potential imbalance. Why would this happen? I might believe that the creatures of the Black Continent understand in some way that humanity, with its constructions and technologies, could affect the delicate balance of the environment, disturbing a harmony that they, by their nature, seek to preserve. If this perception is real, it would bring with it a kind of primitive wisdom, where violence would be avoided because it would irreversibly alter what is most important: the cycle of life, which, incredibly, does not depend on our presence or direct intervention. Moreover, it is possible that the creatures of the Black Continent understand a concept of time that is completely different from ours. For us humans, time is measured in a linear way, and often with a sense of urgency or aggressiveness. They, on the other hand, may have a more fluid understanding, where events do not unfold with the same intensity of meanings that we attribute to each action. Perhaps they simply do not see the need to attack because they are not in a hurry, because they know that the true winner in the game of existence is patience. If this is true, the creatures of the Black Continent may see humans as a potential threat, but still as something insignificant in the grand scheme of the life that surrounds them. After all, it is possible that the very idea of time and duration for them is different. What seems immediate to us may be completely irrelevant to them, who have a much broader perspective than, for example, a simple dispute or confrontation. It is also interesting to note how the creatures in some way coexist with the space of the Black Continent in a nearly ritualistic manner. In many of the accounts I have encountered, humans who ventured through these lands did not encounter direct aggression, but rather a form of passive resistance. They do not attack, do not take an offensive posture, but make it clear that there are limits. These limits may be more related to our perception of invasion than to any desire for destruction on their part. The Black Continent is a place full of symbols, of presences that challenge our understanding of the natural world. For these creatures, the simple act of being there would in itself be a violation of what they consider to be the natural order. In my view, perhaps the behavior of the creatures is a manifestation of something deeper, a principle that goes beyond life and death as we know them. They live in a more intangible way, in spheres that are in constant balance, and violence to them is a dissonance that would disturb this equilibrium. By not attacking humanity, they may, in fact, be leaving us within a cycle of constant reflection, as if the great mystery of the Black Continent were, in turn, an invitation to introspection, to the analysis of our own nature. Of course, there are also more pragmatic theories. Some suggest that although the creatures of the Black Continent are formidable, they may simply be uninterested in direct interaction with humans, as our presence in their lands is something they consider temporary, irrelevant in the face of the vast existence that fills the continent. Perhaps the creatures have understood in some way that our presence, even though considered a disturbance, does not represent a true threat. They simply perceive that our impact is limited. Who knows? They may see our constructions, our cities, and our empires as ephemeral, as dust that sooner or later will be swallowed by the very nature that surrounds them. Perhaps on some level, these creatures have developed a kind of deep understanding of what it means to be human, something we ourselves do not always comprehend about ourselves. Perhaps they see our limitations, our fragility, and instead of attacking, they choose only to observe. Who knows? They may have already understood that the real threat to humans is not the wild environment or the creatures, but something deeper, something we ourselves have created and that often remains hidden from us. This idea is not absurd if we consider that the Black Continent, in its vastness and mystery, is more than just a simple land. It is, in a sense, a reflection of humanity, a mirror of our own insecurities and limitations. Perhaps, by avoiding direct confrontation, the creatures are actually allowing us to reveal ourselves, forcing us to confront our own limits. It wouldn't be surprising if, in their silence, they were subtly pushing us toward a forced introspection. With their ancient wisdom, they may understand that the destruction of humankind will not come from an external force, but from human behavior itself, from the relentless pursuit of power, so control, and expansion. In a sense, this reveals a worldview where the greatest danger to us is not a physical threat or a monstrous creature, but our own nature in its most selfish and destructive form. There is something fascinating about this type of understanding. It's as if these creatures had already experienced a time when there were attempts at conflict, but over time, they realized that the true struggle, the most complex of all, is internal. Perhaps they have already gone through similar phases, where aggression against others was an immediate response, but over time, proved futile. Maybe in some way, they are helping us understand that the true enemy is not external, but within ourselves, in our need to dominate, control, and destroy anything we consider different. However, a part of me wonders if, on some level, the creatures of the Dark Continent are not simply testing our resilience, waiting for us to evolve further, to overcome our tendency to act impulsively. What is at stake, perhaps, is our ability to understand, to transcend instinct. It could be that they are waiting patiently until humanity reaches a point of maturity where violence is finally abandoned in favor of something higher, something more aligned with the natural laws of the world we live in. I can't help but think that this idea of patience and observation on the part of the creatures may be the most revealing element of all. They don't attack because in their wisdom, they already understand the complexity of our existence. They know that our greatest challenge is internal, that our struggle is not against them, but against our own nature. And somewhere, they must also understand that if they allow us to face this challenge alone, we will be stronger and more capable of coexisting with the world in a more harmonious way. If these creatures truly have wisdom that transcends our understanding, perhaps their stance of not attacking is a way to preserve balance, to protect the Dark Continent from our own destruction. By observing us without interfering, they allow us to follow our own path without the easy shortcuts of violence and conquest. Perhaps they understand that each human being must on their own discover the limits of their existence, and that true evolution comes not through the subjugation of other beings, but through the conquest of internal harmony. I think that perhaps the secret to all of this is simpler than we imagine. Maybe the true reason for the creature's behavior is a matter of priorities. They, with all their vastness and wisdom, may have understood that humanity, at its core, is engaged in its own destruction. Perhaps the creatures of the Dark Continent, with their silent behavior, are simply watching us, waiting for us to self-annihilate, as if the game has already been decided. This might explain the absence of a direct confrontation, not because the creatures are incapable of defeating us, but because they know, in their essence, that we are already compromising our own fate without even realizing it. Perhaps then the true mystery of the creatures is precisely their unwavering patience, a patience that challenges us to question our own choices, while they silently wait. Hunters, that was our video for today. Leave a like if you enjoyed our video, subscribe to the channel as it is still very new, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then.